So, now to begin the section I call the game part of the questions. I've summarized all these down to a game because all these questions evolve to what do you think of this game? What do you think of this game? What do you think of this game? How do you feel about this game? Blah, blah, blah. There's a couple exceptions here, but I mentioned those in the actual questions. So, as I format this a little bit easier, there we go. First question. The Witcher and Witcher 2, are you going to try them? Now, as I've said before, the Witcher games look like games that I would appreciate and approve of and endorse. The kind of games that are made the way games should be made. There's actual choice, there's actual development of the plot, it's very well done. They actually care about what the customers think and react accordingly. Blah, 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 blah. The choices matter, things carry forward, all that sort of thing, right? So all sounds fantastic. The problem is the Witcher series is a very dark series, a very gray versus black series, and the kind of thing I don't generally get into. And so, all things considered, at the end of the day, I probably will not. Maybe, I don't know. Right now, I was planning on getting The Witcher in 1 and 2, as so many people recommended it, but then I started looking into it, and I started finding out how much the story would be not my thing, because I didn't care for the books either, consequently. And on top of that, money is becoming slightly more of an issue lately. And so between those two facts, it's unlikely. I would still be willing to give them a try. Don't mistake me, but it would require a situation that doesn't exist right now, which is most unfortunate. Uh, as I said, I'm going to go ahead and make the no additional questions rule as of this one. So this is a repeat question, but and it was asked me like 7 times. What do you think about Star Wars 1313? Are you going to buy it? Blah blah blah. Again, as I said previously, Star Wars 1313 has great potential, has amazing potential, and I am very looking forward to it, assuming they do it right, which is the catch. If they go too far with the darkier and edgier, I keep calling it that because I'm making fun of that concept. I think darker and edgier is something that is overused. I think it's something that is done too much in order to try and make things sell rather than make a good product. And so, for example, the new Lara Croft that's coming out was darkier and edgier way too much. And if they don't go that far with it, it could work. As long as they hold themselves back, as long as there's a degree of moderation, awesome. So, theoretically speaking, I would be buying that maybe when it came out, depending on how they pull it off. Next question, Zelliard. Shoot, oh, Zelliard. I remember Zelliard. As my brain just leaves me for a second. Zelliard was an old game, a DOS game actually. I liked Zelliard. I remember playing it. I didn't play it that much because that's right about the time when I got a hold of TIE Fighter for the first time. And another game that I never actually remember the name of, which is such a shame. But Zelliard was an awesome game. It was a game that was I shouldn't call it awesome. It was a good game. It was a game that had an interesting concept. It was an RPG, but it was a side-scroller platformer RPG, and it had an interesting concept and it was fun. And I really enjoyed it. I recommend anyone who has the time to go pick it up on Good Old Games or something similar. Let's see here. Have you played the Total War series? Yes, I have. I've been a fan of Total War basically since the beginning. There's a couple that I prefer more than the others, such as the Colonial one, whose name I can't think of actually, and the most recent Samurai one, Samurai 2, I guess, or Shogun 2 rather. And I've always been a fan of the Total War series. I love that concept of RTS mixed with campaign level combat, and I think more games should do this particular combination, especially since, if I'm completely honest, the RTS part of Total War has never really caught me. It's interesting when you actually get to the battle, but the setup and I don't know how to explain it. It feels very boring getting set up for a battle in Total War, and I hate myself for saying that, but that is just my opinion. But once I get to the battle, once I actually am in the moment and giving the orders and trying to flank the enemy and all that fun stuff, it's awesome. And so that's one of the reasons I keep putting up with it, is because it's like, okay, already accelerated to 4 times speed, waiting. Okay, you move here, we move forward like this. Nothing's happening. Oh, okay, we've met the enemy. Yes, go. So love the Total War series. The second question this gentleman asked is a little bit difficult to summarize, so I just went ahead and copy pasted it. The gentleman said, I have begun to find myself at the end of Total War games wondering if it was all worth it. It is an odd but great human moment when my countless martyrs sort of flash before my eyes. Have you ever had a similar experience with any game, not just grand strategy titles? Yes, I have, actually. And it is an awesome moment whenever that happens. One of the things that usually tends to happen for me is in something like Civilization or Master of Orion or something similar like that, where I just think, oh God, how many lives have been flung onto the pile in order to make this happen, you know? And Alpha Centauri is actually probably the pinnacle example there I would give, because you basically can't avoid loss of human life in Alpha Centauri. That was a very dark, very unpleasant circumstances that humanity found themselves in, trying to survive and then thrive. And you look back and you think, was it worth it? But that's also true in really good RPGs. One of my favorites of that was going to be Mass Effect 3. It's stalking me, I'm telling you. But no, seriously, if Mass Effect 3 had the ending I wanted, which it didn't, you know what I would have done at the end of the ending? I would have been like, yes, that was amazing, that was awesome, that was epic, and I would have leaned back in my chair. Not this chair, I would have been at home. I would have leaned back in my chair, and I would have been like, and I would just pick, I would have thought of Thane, I would have thought of Legion, I would have thought of Morden, I would have thought of Anderson, because I do think Anderson should have died, to be completely honest with you. I would have thought of the lives that had been lost and how, was it worth it? That's an excellent moment, and it's truly a good type of game or a good game that manages to pull that sort of thing off. So, moving along. Have I ever played Star Trek Armada? Whoops. Yes, I have played Star Trek Armada. For some reason, I never got into it, and I think that's because I was having a problem with the game itself. There was a bug. That's right, I remember now. There was a bug that was preventing me from sending orders to shift the shield rotations, which kind of made the game irritating and frustrating to play, and I didn't actually like the UI that much. However, it is one of those games that's on my go back to someday list. And there's there's an actual list I have, because I'm an organized kind of person, of games I'd like to go back to that I didn't really get the chance that they should have at the time for whatever reason. So I'm looking forward to playing that again, someday, whenever I get the chance. Let's see here. What do I think of Killer 7 and Shadows of the Damned? Now, I thought Killer 7 was awesome. Killer 7, if you have not picked it up or have not played it, I highly recommend you at least go and check out the YouTube of it. It is a little bit on the quirky side, and by a little bit I mean a lot. It is very quirky, it is very unusual, it is very different, and that's kind of the point. Killer 7 is... you can't even define the genre of the game. It's a game. It's a video game. That's about all I've got for you. It is very off the beaten path, but it does so in a good way. And that, as I've said many times, it's not your genre, it's not your game, it's not your mechanics, it's not your music, it's not your label, it's not the developer that makes it, it's not the publisher that makes it. It's whether or not it's a good game that determines whether or not it's a good game. And I thought Killer 7 was well done. That's especially relevant when coming to the second question, which is Shadows of the Dam, which was made by the trio of awesome, whose names I can't think of right now, but one of the gentlemen from Killer 7 was working there too. I didn't like Shadow of the Damned at all. I thought it was terrible. I thought it wasn't funny. I didn't like the combat. The story was abysmal. The whole thing was just okay. And it just didn't catch me. I never actually finished it. I just put it down. I was like, okay, this is not interesting. And I was so disappointed by it. So I'm afraid I don't have much to say on that. Of course, I don't get into the whole innuendo thing in general. It's just never been my thing, even when I was younger. So I suppose that's part of it. Next game on the list, 3D Dot Heroes. I want to make this absolutely clear. I love 3D Dot Heroes. I strongly recommend anyone with a PS3 to go at least think about picking up 3D Dot Heroes. I'm not kidding. If you liked Zelda ever, pick up 3D Dot Heroes. It is such an amazing game. It's funny, it's interesting, it's fun, it's engaging, it's difficult when it should be, it's easy when it should be. There's a surprisingly huge and open world for you to explore. It is effectively a modern, old-school Zelda, and even the little details. One of the things they did, which I found hilarious, the whole game is done in pixels, 3D pixels, right? I have to use this because you have to understand this. They actually render all of the blocks that make you up, all the cubes that make up your pixelated character. So when you defeat an enemy, those blocks go flying. And I found it absolutely ironic that a 3D pixelated game required a system of the complexity and processing power of the PS3 in order to do that. Because in order to render all those little cubes flying out and all the cubes that are going on the screen at the time actually takes a fairly large amount of processing power, which is hilarious. But the whole game is awesome, and I love it, and I recommend it to anybody. Ironically, the very next game I'm about to talk about I'm gonna talk to my game. Hey, game, how are you doing? You feeling okay today? Um, is another game that I would strongly recommend to anyone. Terranigma. It's for the Super Nintendo, and it is an amazing, awesome game. It ended a little bit on of a downer, which is unfortunate. I was really hoping for a happy ending on that. Yes, I know it could be interpreted as happy. I personally interpret it as a downer. I interpret it as a sad, tragic ending, which is a shame, because the game is nothing short of incredible. I don't know how to describe Terranigma probably properly. I don't know how to give it the level of oomph that it really deserves. It is an amazing game. I strongly recommend anybody who has the facility to do so to check it out. Terranigma. It's spelled out here. Terranigma. Amazing game. Next game. Okay, here we go. Here's a game that I don't recommend. No, I'm kidding. Uh, Pathologic and The Void. I wasn't aware of these games. Well, actually, I was aware of these games, but I didn't get into them. I looked at them and I looked at the idea for what the game was, and then I said, nope. I've never been into that type of game. As I said earlier, with regards to Heavy Rain, I don't get into that sort of thing. I don't even know how to describe it. The psychological thing, the horror thing, the terror thing. It isn't my thing. It never has been, and so I look at that and I think, okay, that looks very well done and very well presented, and it did. It did actually look very good. It just didn't look like something I would enjoy, which is a shame. But anybody who's into that sort of thing, I do recommend it. Speaking of games that I never actually got into, Klonoa. I'm not actually sure I'm pronouncing that properly, and Klonoa 2. I have no words to explain how that didn't catch me. I couldn't even. I was actually sitting there like, why didn't I really get into those games? Because I played Klonoa 1. I never actually played Klonoa 2. And I was like, why didn't it catch me? Why didn't it do anything? I have no idea. I don't have an answer, I'm afraid. Not something I can comment on very much. Excuse me. Have you ever played anything with the Persona or the Shin Megami Tensei series? Yes, I have. I've played one of the Personas, partially, and two of the the SM. Actually, I guess I've played three of the SMT series now at this point. A friend of mine is very big on the series and has always followed it. I personally don't care for it, and the one I could point to is Digital Devil Saga, I believe, which had a very interesting plot, I'll admit, and an interesting concept, but I don't know. I once again am failing at explaining how I don't like a thing. As I'm going to mention later, in regards to anime titles, it's not that it was the fact that it was anime, or it's not the fact that it was Japanese that I didn't like it for. Obviously, because I like some animes and I like a lot of Japanese games, so I can't point to something like that. It's not that simple. I just looked at it and I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I especially didn't like Persona. And the main reason is because of the social networking game. A friend of mine, the friend of mine who's into the series, or rather who's into the SMT series, hated Persona 3 because what he ended up doing was he disliked the social networking side of the game so much. He would literally he would go, go up to the tower, do his thing, and then he would sleep in his bed, and then he'd go back and he'd sleep in his bed, and then he'd go back and sleep in his bed. And he'd just go cycle through until the next point on the calendar where he could get back to the tower, what he actually wanted to do. I found that amusing. Next game on the list, Star Wars Rebellion. I mentioned this in brief, but I want to say something really quick here. I am one of, I guess, 5 now, because several of my commenters liked it as well, people who really enjoyed Star Wars Rebellion. Star Wars Rebellion, for anybody who doesn't know, is an incredibly complicated, real-time, grand strategy game in which you take control of the Rebel Alliance or the Empire during the Galactic War in Star Wars. And when I say the whole galaxy, I basically mean it. It's not as huge as, say, Spore or anything like that, but it is fairly large. There are a lot of systems, there are a lot of planets, and there's a lot of things you can do with that. And it is very complicated, very difficult to keep track of, lots of micromanaging basically required, and I love it. I loved that game. I loved the fact that you actually were in charge of the galaxy and can just kind of stretch out your control and take things over and turn the Star Wars series whichever way you wanted to. But I loved the heck out of those games, and or rather that game. And I really need to go find my copy and play that again sometime because I've been in the mood lately. Next question. Have you ever played the Indigo Prophecies? Again, this is not a game that was my interest. There was something so... I don't get into non sequitur when taken to an extreme, and in my opinion, Indigo Prophecies took non sequitur to an extreme. I'm sure there's some explanation for it that I just don't know. Or maybe there isn't. Maybe it's just the point is to be random and weird. But I don't get into that sort of thing. Weird. That's a good word. I don't get into weird stuff. Yes, I know that that sounds odd coming from someone who's like me, but I just don't get into that sort of thing. So again, Indigo Prophecies, no, no, thank you. You know, I have nothing. I have nothing negative to say about it. It's not a terrible game. It's just not my thing. Next question: Parasite Eve, and any interest in a sequel? Now, I loved Parasite Eve. Well, I shouldn't say I loved it. I liked it. I only played through Parasite Eve twice and Parasite Eve 2 once. Both were excellent games, I thought. You know, good games, certainly games that were enjoyable. Certainly, at the time, it was a relatively new concept, taking the whole standard RPG format and putting it in a modern setting with, guns and things like that. It was still a fairly new idea at the time, and so it was interesting on the face of it, and was relatively well presented. And the story, such as it was, since it's basically a horror movie story, which is kind of threadbare, was nonetheless there, and it was interesting in its own right. Now, whether or not like to see a sequel or not, that's an interesting question because they did do a sequel, whose name I suddenly can't think of. Third Birthday, that was it. Came out last year, I believe, on the PSP, and was nothing compared to Parasite Eve 1 or 2. It wasn't. I'm not going to say it was a terrible game, but it was not a good game at all. It was, ugh. And one thing I never really got into with the Parasite Eve series was how kind of gross things were. Yes, I know they're mitochondria and they should be gross. I get that. It's still kind of weird and still kind of gross. It doesn't stop being gross just because it should be gross. Nevertheless, if they did a proper sequel of Parasite Eve 1 and 2, that would be pretty cool, I think, if they actually pulled it off right. So, who knows. Next question. Hard War. Hard War. Oh, I had to look that one up, didn't I? Hang on just a moment, please. I looked all this stuff up quite a while ago. When I was originally... Ah, yes! That was the flight sim. That was the Elite style game. That was a good game. That was a game that I actually only got to play for a little bit because it was a friend's copy. Or rather, I should say it was at a friend's house back in Auburn. But that was a fun game. I liked that. I liked the concept. I've always gotten into that kind of free-roaming flight sim, where you have the option of going and doing your own thing and taking care of pirates and trading and doing missions, that kind of thing. It's always been interesting to me, at least if it's done properly, which it isn't always, admittedly. Let's see here. The Hitman series. Yes, I have played some of the Hitman series. I don't remember which. I remember played original. I think I played one other after that. I don't remember which one. And the first one bothered me, but that was mostly because of the problems everyone's aware of, I guess I should say. You mess up, you lose the mission, you start off way back here and have to do the whole mission again, and it just got really irritating. But the other one I played was very good and very interesting, and I liked the way that it allowed you to essentially plan your own assassination. There was not one way to do the assassination, you had several options, and if they continue that in the new one, which is coming out this year, I believe, that'll be awesome. I like that idea. I like that concept of, plan it out, figure it out, make your way through it and do it. It's the thing I used to get into when playing Cyberpunk. Here's the mission, here's the building you're supposed to infiltrate. There's no one way to get in. It's just you think about the way you think about it, and you figure it out for yourself and all that fun stuff, which is always interesting to me. Bayonetta. I didn't play Bayonetta personally. I looked at it and realized that it was not something I was going to get into. The sex appeal thing was ratcheted way too high, in my opinion. Excuse me. Oh, goodness. And as I've said before, while I have nothing against that being an option, it's not something I like personally. And I'd also like to add that I was also at a time when God of War and Devil May Cry were doing their thing, and in my opinion were very enjoyable games. The one thing I will say for Bayonetta is the gameplay did look really good, and the gameplay looked actually enjoyable. I have read up on the story a bit, and it does look suitably complex, which is good. I do like complex storylines. So it's one of those games that's on that maybe someday list I'd like to give a chance. I don't know, though. We'll see, I suppose. Next question. Elite. I just mentioned Elite. Yes, of course I've played Elite. Of course I've played the Elites. I played those when they came out. I played those when those were new. I feel old. I loved the Elites. I loved the heck out of them. Those and Star Control. And the other game I can never think of the name of were games that I just played so much. I can't even begin to express how much I played those games, and loved every moment of it. Nothing but good stuff to say there. Obviously, I couldn't go back and play Elite now. I don't consider Elite an art game because I don't think it aged well. and I don't think there's any reason to go back and replay it. However, I certainly have to give the game its props for essentially starting that whole genre. So, again, props. Now, this was one of those lengthy questions that I've summarized a bit. It was asking about Majora's Mask for the Zelda series. Now, I keep getting this question. I just want to get this out of the way really quick. I keep getting the comment, I don't know if you're into Zelda at all. Yeah, I'm into Zelda a lot. As I've gone on record before saying that, unless we count those CDI things, which don't exist, I will go on record as saying that every single Zelda game ever made is, at the very bare minimum, good, and usually much better than good. The Zelda series is one of the few series that has never made a bad game, in my opinion, and there are only few series like that. And that trend continues. I'm almost through Skyward Sword now, and I'm going to do a review on it when I finally finish. But yes, I'm a huge Zelda fan, and I love those games a lot. That being said, Majora's Mask was one of the more interesting ones. I didn't like Majora's Mask when it came out, because I only played like 10 minutes into it at the demo at the store, and I was like, okay, this doesn't sound like the kind of thing I'm into. When I finally got a hold of a proper copy and played it for a while, I was like, oh, okay, this is awesome. And then I played through it, and I was like, yes, this is incredible, just like all Zelda games are. Um, that being said, the question was being asked is, do I think a proper sequel could be done of Majora's Mask, or do I think what would be better done is a game done in Termina's setting? Termina being the world that Majora's Mask is set in, for those who don't know. Personally, I could go either way, but if I really had my option, I thought about this for a while, if I really had my option, I would go for a prequel. I think it would be interesting to see what happened to lead Majora into the mask and have that whole conflict where the society crumbled, and they hint at this throughout the game, talking about all the things that led to the Majora being in the mask and all that fun stuff. I think that would be very, very awesome if done properly and very enjoyable. So that's my opinion. Second guess, I'd probably go ahead and say a game set in Termina, but not actually a sequel to Majora's Mask, because that whole setting, that whole world that they basically created for that game was actually rather in depth. There was a lot of depth to it. There was a lot of characters to it. There were a lot of interesting individuals there, and I think they could do more with that, which would be awesome. Next question. Jade Empire, and will you do a review of it? I guess actually this is more, will you do a review, because we're into that section now. No, I'm not going to be doing a review of Jade Empire, at least not immediately. I have way too many other games on my list, and I only played through Jade Empire once. As I said before, it was not a bad game, not at all, but it seemed very ordinary to me, at least for their standards. It seemed very normal. I don't even know how to explain it properly, so nothing about it really caught me. The only thing that really, I guess that's a lie, the only thing that really caught me about that was the open hand and the closed fist thing. I like that concept, but not really on my list of actual games to review. Now, speaking of which, I was supposed to put the questions in reverse order here. To start the review section, will you keep doing reviews of games based on the list of wanted titles? Yes, I will. There's actually only one exception to that right now, and that would be Skyward Sword, which is a game no one has requested, but a game that I always intended to review as soon as I finished it. And I do indeed have several things to say about the game. So, other than that, yeah, I intend to keep going down the list. I do have an actual list, like I said, very organized, of games that people have requested. I'm not going to review all the games on that list, or at least not immediately, but we'll see. I would like to get through that and do my thing here. Will I do a Diablo 3 review? Yes, I will. Especially now that I am in Inferno and actually can comment on it more in depth and comment on the game more in depth. I do very much want to do a Diablo 3 review. Let me give a teaser. For those of you who want to see me bash the game, you are going to be disappointed. I have very good things to say about Diablo 3. I apologize, but that's just the truth of it, Will I do a Kingdoms of Amalur review? I'm not sure if I'm actually going to do a review of that one because I haven't finished the game yet. It's a huge game. But if you're on the fence, the question asker who was asking about this was asking, should I buy the game? Personally, I think it's worth the money. Personally, I think Kingdoms of Amalur is a great game. It's one of those hidden gem games. I can't believe that just kind of slid under the carpet there. I almost didn't notice it. A friend of mine pointed it out to me because I'd seen it and I'd seen the ads. As I've discussed before, the ads I thought were terrible and just made it sound like this horrible game. And a friend of mine pointed it out to me. I was like, here, play the demo. And I was like, okay, oh my god, this is awesome. I loved the game. Very much enjoyed it. Very much am enjoying it. I've put it down for now because I'm working on other projects. But I do recommend picking it up, especially if you could get it at a decent price. And final review question, are you going to be reviewing Oblivion? I hadn't actually gotten this request before. I could review Oblivion. You know, I know Oblivion extremely well. I've played through the entire game more than once, and done so recently. I did so as just last year, at the end of last year, in preparatory for Skyrim coming out. So yeah, I will go ahead and add that to the list. And I'm going to go ahead and stop here, I think. And then we'll do the second to last section of the questions.